Hello and welcome to the Shack News Chattycast, the podcast that has had a very weird week. I'm one of your hosts, Steve Watts.
I'm your other host, Brian Carr, and Steve, as always, today's Chattycast brought to you by Audible.com. Get your free audiobook download and your 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/Chattycast.
Thank you, Brian. So I referenced it's been a weird week. I apologize for that if anyone is checking their podcast feeds and noticed that it didn't come out on Thursday as it usually does. That was my fault. There's been all sorts of crazy house things happening to my downstairs, but we carved out a time when there is no hammering or sawing going on, and we have two guests today. So I'll introduce the newbie first. We'll just throw him into the fire. Joining us for the first time on the show, we have John Kiefer.
Hi.
Hi, John.
Of course.
He seems very tired.
Some of you guys remember me from years ago, but I'm back. He's back.
We're also recording in the morning, so if we're all tired, that's why. Also, some of us have babies, so if I'm tired, that's why. We're turning this into a morning zoo show. So Brian's got traffic on the fives. Let's go to Brian. Our other guest
Everyone's backed up for at least 4 miles, so if you're looking to get to work on time, it's not going to happen. You want to take the surface streets, all right? Take the surface streets and turn down on Johnson Boulevard.
Thanks, Brian. Like a pro. So our other guest this week has been on the show before. Welcome back, David Craddock.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave.
Brian's giddy.
Thanks for that traffic report. That's why I'm here.
You forgot the helicopter sounds.
Yeah, there you go. We're doing Foley work right here on the show. So usually I reference kind of like what the show is about in the intro. I didn't really do that this time, but the show is basically about No Man's Sky, and sort of the weird launch surrounding No Man's Sky. But before we get into all of that, we're going to talk a little bit about what we are playing. So, John, as our first timer, what have you been playing lately?
What have I been playing lately? I have not been playing anything current. I have actually gone back and been playing a little bit of FTL, Faster Than Light, and I've actually been playing a little bit of World of Warcraft again to get prepared for the expansion, which is coming out at the end of the month.
Yeah, I know. Legion.
Yeah, unfortunately, I want to get my hands on the Demon Hunter, which requires me to pre-purchase the game, which I have not pre-purchased the game yet. So I've got to do that. Yeah. So that's what I've.
It's summer. It's kind of the time to do it.
And to be honest, yes, I'm waiting for a PC code for No Man's Sky, so that I can play No Man's Sky. But I did also just get a copy. Get a code for Master of Orion, the reboot, which I am also looking forward to playing.
It's a very space-themed playlist that you've got. You're waiting for No Man's Sky. You went back to FTL.
Maybe a little, yeah, with a touch of WoW fantasy in there. So.
Yeah. David, what are you up to right now?
I'm kind of kicking it new old school. If I so much as think as Resident Evil 4, I booted up on one of the 6 platforms I own it for. So I beat that game again. It's a dangerous thing to think about. But I've also been playing AM2R, the Metroid 2 remake that was released and subsequently squashed by Nintendo. Maybe Nintendo.
Metroid 2, as in the Game Boy version?
Yeah. So this guy, the guy who made it, has been working on it since 2006. And it finally released. It released, I think, last weekend because, hey, Nintendo wasn't going to do anything for Metroid's 30th anniversary, so this guy did.
They're releasing Federation Force. That's something.
Yeah, they're releasing.
It's not going to do anything for
Metroid's
anniversary.
It says Metroid on the box, doesn't it?
It does.
You mean the Metroid game that's not a Metroid game?
I'm convinced that's a typo, a 7-letter typo. But it's AM2R is really, really good. It feels like I think the last 2D official canonized Metroid game was Zero Mission, which came out 12 years ago. And AM2R feels as good as that. I mean, it's incredible for a fan-made game, and one made primarily in Game Maker to boot. It's incredible how good this game plays. It's a lot of fun.
Cool.
Oh, I think Steve is muted.
Yeah, I had muted myself. Sorry.
Oh.
Um, as someone who's never played through Metroid 2, I basically like used my brother's save to see the ending.
Yeah.
Like, what sort of tweaks and improvements have they made to this thing that would welcome back somebody who's like, you know, never made it through that whole thing? It's a little clunky by today's standards.
It is a little clunky. I did a lot of reading on the history for a project I'm working on, but so Metroid 2 is actually my first Metroid game. I got it as a kid, had no idea what it was. I just jumped in because when you're a kid, you just play what your parents buy you. Basically, he took the map, but he stretched it out because Samus moves differently. The physics are different. He imported a lot of that from Fusion, which was another 2D Metroid game for Game Boy Advance. And the levels are longer because he put in like more speed power-ups. There are brand new areas. So it's kind of like playing, I don't know if you've played Ocarina of Time 3D for 3DS, but it's the same game, but they just he spit-shined it a lot and added in a lot of new stuff to modernize it. So it's still the game you know, but it doesn't play like that Game Boy one did. For example, in the Game Boy version, whenever you save, that was the first Metroid game to introduce save stations, but you didn't automatically get a refill of your life or misses. You had to go to separate posts to refill each of those.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
This one does. As soon as you hit a save station, and they're pretty frequent, everything recharges, so you never feel like you have to stop to grind for power-ups. And
so they kind of like Super Metroided
it. Yeah. It's a lot of fun, and it's free fan game. And I've been thinking a lot about how Nintendo treated this versus how a lot of other companies have treated fan-made games. I mean, you have 6 years ago, some guy came out with Mega Man Cross Street Fighter, and instead of stepping on it, Capcom was like, okay, this is an official Mega Man game now because we're not doing anything with it.
Yeah.
And that game was great, and Capcom kind of jumped on board to help the guy polish it. And then you have Nintendo, who has every right to defend their IP, but it's just kind of disappointing that you can still get this game through certain websites, but all the official links from the official website are down, and anyone interested in Metroid and seeing one of the pinnacles of fan-made games should just track this thing down and give it a shot.
Yeah. And just buy Super Metroid on Virtual Console, because that's about as much as they're doing.
Yeah.
Officially. So, Brian,
Yes.
what are you playing right now?
So the games I've been most concerned with this past week are the Olympic Games, because America. And
No, I asked what you're playing.
I even came dressed appropriately today. But the games I have been playing, honestly, I have been trying to pick away at some stuff on my backlog that I had thought I'd never actually get around to. But now I have some time because, games don't actually start happening again until the 23rd. So I have been playing a little bit of Bayonetta 2, which is a game where you can suplex angels and ride on jets and turn into a panther. So it's pretty good. That all happens like basically before the first level's over. So
those are your criteria.
Like literally, I'm not that hard to please. Like if you give me a game where I can turn into a panther and suplex things, all right, let's do it. So I've been playing a bit of that. I have also been picking away at Pokemon Omega Ruby, and that is the least inspiring Pokemon game. It is less something I am excited to play and more of, well, I'm already this close, I might as well finish it so I never have to look at it again. I don't know if it's just that the original design has not aged well.
Back in the box quote from Brian Carter.
Because I'm excited for this new one, because I like the idea of like the region and the stuff they're introducing and the new designs and all that. But so I've been like, all right, I'll go ahead and try to finish this one before I go on to the next one. But this one, man, I really hope the next one.
Might as well get this over with.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I skipped that generation because I was in college and had a girlfriend. So basically, I had no time for Pokemon anymore. And I'm seeing now why I actually didn't miss anything in the first place. So that's kind of been about it. I'm not sure if I've been doing it. Oh yeah, I also restarted XCOM again, and I'm going to have to restart XCOM for a third time because this game is impossible. It is really
XCOM check-in.
The original XCOM or reboot?
So it's actually XCOM 2. Sorry, I should have specified that. And because like I said, I'm a big fan of XCOM, going back to the original, back to UFO Defense. And I really liked Enemy Unknown, and I like XCOM 2 as well, but they added so much stuff that it just makes it, you literally have to do the exact right thing at every given opportunity, or you're behind the 8 ball really, really quickly.
And it's procedural to some extent, so there's not even
It's
like
very
a
procedural, so you have no idea what the right thing is.
the right way to go.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that if I start, I'm taking a break. I'm going to come back and finish it at some point, but when I start my third game, I'm just going to easy mode. There's no shame in it. I just want to see how this plays out, and then
Because I feel like, as somebody who's played it, and I haven't, but it sounds like from your experience, from these weekly check-ins you've been doing, where you're like, man, I have to restart. It sounds like a game where you can do the wrong thing, and you're saying you have to do everything right, but you won't know it until like 5 steps past that, and then you're like, oh wait,
well,
I should have. I zigged when I should have zagged.
It's not even necessarily that you're doing the wrong thing. It's that you are not necessarily prepared to deal with the consequences of what you have done, right? So, like, you'll be like, okay, I just upgraded my weapons, and that's awesome. And you'd think you'd have like a couple missions where you're actually like shooting above your weight, and the aliens can kind of catch up to you. No, like they literally have already moved on to the next thing, and they're bringing in these like giant walker mechs that will kill everything within like a 5-mile radius, and they're bringing these giant like psychic balls that will explode and destroy everything, and like turn your guys they do kill into zombies, and it's just like I just got the magnet guns, like what is happening?
So
it's good, but I think that
check in regularly to see if you ever finish the game.
It's good. The check-ins will not be very frequent going forward, but I still love the idea of Red Dawn with aliens. I think Cassidy put it very well when she said it was like Red Dawn, but I think making it like Red Dawn might have been where a lot of the frustration comes from, because you're supposed to be outgunned and undermanned at all opportunities in that kind of scenario. So
yeah. So I've been mainly playing No Man's Sky, which is the topic this week. So I can actually field questions about this game that we're talking about. We're talking more about the surrounding weirdness than the game itself. But the game itself is probably something different than it will be in like 2 years. I sort of have this prediction that what we're seeing right now is like when we saw the first version of Minecraft. Because they're still saying, oh, there's things like base building and stuff coming, and like if that's true, it reminds me a lot of Minecraft, where originally it was just like sort of this weird procedurally generated world, and you could explore it, but there wasn't that much to do. You could craft some stuff, but 2 years later, or 5 years later, 2 years later it already was, but now 5 or 6 or 7 years later, it's this massive thing with enormous flexibility. I kind of wonder if that's what is going to happen to No Man's Sky. Small team builds a procedurally generated thing and then builds on it and makes it something much more than it ever originally was going to be. But right now, it is pretty sparse. Like I'm not on the review. Josh is, and he seems to be enjoying himself. It is true that no two planets are the same, but their planets are pretty much like the same. Like, like I don't want to trash the algorithm that they used or whatever, but I'll hop from one planet to another, and I'm like, okay, well this one is like a different tint of purple, and the plants here look like a different kind of cactus. Like there's only so much you can do with these like removable parts that they sort of like put in a box and shake up and then dump on the table, and then that's your new planet. I kind of enjoy the gameplay loop of just like you go into a planet, you search, you find the animals, you find the plants, you scan all the stuff, you see if there's any good resource dumps to get, and then you move on. Like that's fun to do once or twice, but I don't know how someone like Josh, who has to because he's reviewing it, does that for hours at a time. Because I'll do like a planet or two, and I'm like, I'm good.
I have a theory about No Man's Sky and about Minecraft and Terraria and stuff like that, and the idea that Josh has the review kind of, I think, cements this. We're old, and the way that we play
Your
video
theory
games...
is we're old?
Well, no, I'm serious, because like I've tried playing Minecraft.
If you call yourself old again, I am going to reach through the video and just punch you in the face, okay? I do not want to hear old from you young snots, so shut up.
Kiefer has worked hard for his old label.
I'm just saying, like,
straight.
I know
Damn
that's
straight.
I know objectively that's not true, but it's on if you're on the internet, if you're not like 17-year-olds.
Yeah, compared to the 11-year-olds playing this game, we are old.
Okay, yeah, okay, so I'm ancient. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
I wouldn't say ancient. I'd say more wise
Experienced.
and seasoned.
Ooh, very tactful.
So,
Nice.
okay, Brian, your greater Minecraft theory. Let's keep going.
But anyway, yeah, because like the big idea I have is that when it comes to Minecraft and Terraria and stuff like that, a lot of younger players are just like, okay, they're used to games as this idea of we can go and do something. It's like very much kind of that self-generated content, self-generated experience, and it feeds into a lot of things like social media and that sort of thing. This is a very long conversation to have another time, but. We as people who are not of that demographic, we're used to games where it's like, okay, I have a story, I have an objective, I have something I'm trying to accomplish, there's a goal, and I have to do that. That is what I do. I work within these parameters. And so when a game's just like, okay, here you go, explore, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm not programmed to think that way. Like, I tried playing Terraria, and I was bored to tears. I had no idea what was happening. I had no interest in going further. And at least No Man's Sky seems to have some kind of story, but I think that's part of why there's like such a huge fervor for this game, and also why you're seeing a lot of people kind of being like, well, I don't know, right? I think it's a generational thing.
For Minecraft, to tie back to Minecraft, like when I played Minecraft, it was like I enjoyed building my fortress, but I've tried going back to Minecraft several times since then, but once I built my fortress and I was like, there, I am impervious, no one can harm me. Okay, I don't really know what to do now. Like, I can't, like, there's nothing to do.
So you got further into Minecraft than I did.
Like, I built myself a cage that made the game not fun.
Wow,
but then,
it's like a metaphor or something.
Yeah.
Rapunzel, let down your hair.
Flowery language. Anyway, but like No Man's Sky, I mean, it does have story. Kind of like I've run into aliens who there will be like a narration text box that pops up because it's still a small team. They do it by text, not voice acting. But like a text box will show up that's like it shows what they're saying, and you might or might not understand what they're saying based on how many of their sort of language codexes you found. And it will say like your impression is that this thing is friendly, but you're not really sure. He's motioning towards your multi-tool. Do you want to give it to him? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then he gave me like a better one, So like, there's little things like that.
That kind of stuff is more interesting to me than just like flying to different planets and like mining for.
Yeah, well, that's because it is like I'm telling you that it is more interesting. Like the thing about Minecraft is the world itself was breakable in such a way that it's like, oh, okay, like it's all Lego. Like the whole everything that I see is Lego. Any surface I see, if I get pickaxe that's hard enough, I can break it. No Man's Sky isn't really like that. It's worlds that obviously the hillscapes and stuff are procedurally generated, and then they populate it with plants that you can destroy some of them, not destroy others, and etc. So it's a little more limited in that way. And just my impression from going from planet to planet is I walk around, I scan some stuff, I'm like, okay. And then I go on to the next planet. And there's nothing wrong with that gameplay loop. I'm wondering, even if you're not into games as narrative experiences and you just want things to explore, I don't know how that sustains itself for hours and hours at a time.
See, that was going to be my next question. Is what do you think the longevity of something like this is?
I have no idea. Like, it must be longer for some people than others, because Josh said he's done like 30 to 40 hours, and he's either done or he's almost done.
Well, a lot of the hype and excitement around this is the last video game you'll ever need to play.
Yeah, that's not true.
This is infinite. And
was Hello Games the one saying that?
No,
Hello Games was pretty. I think they were pretty
they've been
reasonable about their
consistent on the messaging about what this game is. I think
they were bad about explaining what it was, which left people to fill in a lot of the blanks. But I don't think they themselves were like misleading in any particular way.
No, it's the story got built up around them, not necessarily because of them.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what the longevity of this thing is. I'm going to try to stick through it to the end. If I say end like in quotes because like who knows what the end even is. Like I won't say what it was because I don't want to spoil anything. But Josh asked me today, like, hey, this thing happened, and I can start a new game plus. Does that count as finishing the game so I can write my review? And I was like, I don't know. Like I was like, did credits roll? Do credits roll in this game? And he's like, I don't think so.
There's an interesting. This is kind of piggybacking on Brian's theory, which I found interesting. But there's an interesting corollary that can be drawn between No Man's Sky, and science and philosophy.
No, you were right the first time.
Yeah. A lot of people think that scientists and philosophers are men and women in lab coats locked away in their ivory tower doing thinking.
Mhm.
It's kind of like when you're a student in algebra and you're like, well, when am I going to use this in real life? A lot of people need to find practical uses for things. In No Man's Sky, we need to answer the question: who are we? Why are we here? Why are we doing this? The point of a lot of science is, thinking for thinking's sake is not bad.
Yeah.
We're learning.
Mhm.
We're
And that's
experimenting. And No Man's Sky might be that. And
that's a really cool point that you brought up, and I'm glad that you did, David, because I would have completely forgotten to mention this. But like the thing that I think the thing that I like the most about No Man's Sky is that like it is very much like worshipful of actual science. Like you're not you're not trying to conquer anything. Like your job is to go out and explore, and you get rewarded with money for it. Like when you discover an entire planet's ecosystem, if you scan everything on a planet, that gives you like a bonus. So like it behooves you to understand the holistic nature of a planet when you go to a planet and you're like, okay, well this animal and this animal and this animal and this plant and this plant and this plant, so it's really about like rewarding discovery in this way that makes it feel very like pro science. And, like,
that's really cool. Like that's really good.
yeah, like I think that's kind of the coolest thing about, like that's the thing that I like the most about it, and just it's the kind of game that when you explain to people who aren't gamers, their mind is like blown. Like I was like I was explaining this to my wife the first night I got it when I was just trying it out for the first time, and I was like, well, it's procedurally generated, and like I could end up on a planet that somebody else has discovered, but probably not because there's just so many planets. And she's like, oh, how many are there? I'm like 700 quintillion, I think.
Yeah.
And like that's not an exaggeration. I think
Billions.
that's, yeah,
Billions.
I think that's the actual number is 700 quintillion. So far every planet that I've discovered I've been the one to discover it. I haven't landed on a planet that somebody else has been to first yet. And so like when you tell that to somebody who doesn't play games, it's like that there's just this gigantic living universe that people can crisscross, but they won't necessarily just because it's so big. It's mind blowing, and it's sort of a good illustration of like how vast the actual universe is.
Steve, I can't be on this podcast and miss an opportunity to mention Zelda. So here we go.
Okay,
I think
we get 20 minutes, everybody.
I promise this is related, but I think it's interesting how the games industry is sick. Indie games started as these very niche experiences, and now look at No Man's Sky. I mean, No Man's Sky was presented on a grand stage. Sean Murray's got a lot of face time during Sony's presentations at E3. Indie games are blowing up in scale, and also they are informing the development of AAA games. Look at Breath of the Wild. That could very much be a game where, yeah, you can run out immediately and beat Ganon. Grab the Master Sword. It's still like half naked from the waist up, and just Ganon. Or it sounds like you're going to be able to run around and just do things, and that's going to be an objective. That will be a reason that a lot of people might play that game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that, I think it's great that that it will allow you to do either of those things. I don't know. It's like I said, it's a thing I appreciate more than I think I'm really interested in playing.
Right.
So
But
one thing.
I do have one more question before we go.
Yes. Yeah.
So I also started playing a little bit of Rebel Galaxy, and I have to ask, how much like dirty honky tonk space trucking?
Oh, like none.
Okay,
Like
never
none
mind.
at all.
Never mind.
Yeah, like when you do find
I'll stick with Rebel Galaxy.
when you do find facilities, they're usually abandoned except for the Gek, the aliens, and they are always pristine. Like there is no use to this universe.
There's no shady bars.
This is Star Trek, not Star Wars. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
So yeah, I know that David has to run a little early, and I also know that David had something that he wanted to say. So I'm going to segue neatly into that. One of the things surrounding this game, by no fault of the game itself, again, is sort of by some fault of the game itself, I guess. It had sort of a weird rollout where they didn't send out review copies, and there was all this hype. It seems like the reason they didn't send out review copies was because they had this huge day one patch that kind of fundamentally changed the game in a lot of ways. So because sites were eager to hop on the train of this big hyped popular game, there were copies obtained from shops that broke the street date, and they started streaming and posting reports on what this game was like. And then a few days later, this patch came out, and it's like, oh, this patch is completely different than what I played. Like, it bears almost no resemblance from what I haven't played the pre-patch version, so I don't know. But from what we hear, it bears like almost no resemblance. So we wanted to talk a little bit. I have a sort of a no navel gazing rule on this podcast. I don't like talking too much about journalism, but this was sort of like a big event that happened in the games industry this week. And I know that Kiefer had some strong opinions on it as an old school journalist. But I also know that David, you wanted to comment on like the good side of having a record out there of what this game was like before the patch.
So that's kind of my whole shtick. I've become somewhat of a gaming historian over the past 6, 7, 8 years. Do the books I write, the research I do, and so even though I think that again, piggybacking off of Brian, thank you for being so insightful today, Brian.
You're welcome.
Yeah. But only today.
I make it my goal to be as unhelpful and just completely barren as possible any other week.
I just find it interesting that, speaking of game players today, they're very fixated. They can be fixated on the here and now, the current hot thing. What is this Tuesday's big release? But right now I can take my Diablo 1 CD, I can install it, and if I play offline, I can play version 1.0 of that game. I can play it as it was at launch. I can't do that with No Man's Sky. I can't do that with Diablo 3. I can't do that with WoW. I am very interested in games as time capsules, and especially with always-on games, as games that are patched and in ways that don't allow you to prevent the patch. I find these impressions pieces, I don't think they're worthless. I think they are somewhat historical records. I think that every Reddit AMA that Sean Murray has done, every presentation he's giving, every preview that has been written, in this game especially, we don't really know what it is. We don't know what it's going to be. I view these as pieces of a puzzle that will never be complete, and I find that interesting.
Yeah, and historically, I think you've definitely got a point, and I think that tying it back to Minecraft again, because we've talked about that a bunch, that game has changed a lot, but somewhere, in the bowels of the internet, we have a record of every single change that game has undergone on every single platform, because there have been different changes on different platforms. So, like, historically, I think that you're right. I think that John's concern, which I'll let John speak for himself in a second, but I think John's concern was the people interested in games as history is a kind of small niche audience, like of nerds like us who care about that sort of thing, and the wider audience of the game, who are just curious, like, hey, should I pick up this space game? Like, they were getting the wrong impression of the game,
Well, David, your explanation. Okay, I'm not quite as readily to rake you over the coals as I was earlier, but so I'll accept your explanation as is, and that does have a lot of merit. But to me, something like that needs to be discussed one-on-one with Sean Murray, or somebody needs to be discussed with, with the development team. Granted, if you want to go back in and play it, you can't anymore just because of the nature of the internet and the updates and everything instantaneous. But my biggest bitch with the way things were handled.
Working blue today.
I'm sorry. It's just,
it's okay. We curse on this show all the time. You don't know.
I was gonna say you. Hey, I'm wearing blue. Okay, so but no, my biggest complaint was the fact that at least a week before the game was supposed to come out, they made it very clear that there was going to be a substantial day one patch. And the fact that, okay, you can't control some of the idiots who want to go out and get the game first. Okay, so this guy pays $2,000 to get a copy of the game. He starts playing it, and he posts his impressions. Okay, fine. You can't do anything about that. You can't do anything about these stores, that are stupid and break street dates. That I get. But people who hold themselves up as journalists whose goal is to serve the reader, knowing that you have a day one patch that is, I see you smiling, Steve. I see you smiling. You know that I'm on a rant. people who are supposed to serve the reader and knowing that there's a substantial day one patch coming out that could substantially change the way that people play the game, knowing that they're not going to see what you are streaming or what you're writing about, I think that's unconscionable. I totally think that that doesn't serve anybody but yourself. It just serves the page click, and it doesn't serve the people who you purport to write for.
I would disagree there because I think that news has always been ephemeral. History is immutable, but the present is constantly changing into the future. You're covering the game as it is at this point in time. Day one patches are pretty.
But the thing is nobody has the game in time except for the people who got it illegally. Okay, there is no game in time until August 9th.
That is not true and has not been true. Anytime the street date is broken, it's not like only Kotaku and this guy who paid exorbitant amounts of money got this game. I'm sure other people did. I think their experience hearing from them is still worthwhile. I
think. See, again, I'll come out sort of in the middle of you guys. But to break up the fisticuffs here, like I think you're both right. I think David, like you're right that like it does serve an audience. It does serve. There is an audience out there for that content. The people who got it early, or just the people who are like game history nerds and are kind of curious and understand it in the context of this is the nature of patches makes this basically a game still in development as of before the patch.
But do you really believe?
So the fact that like
believe that that's what people are reading for?
No. That's what
I'm sorry.
That's what I'm going towards, John. Because I'm saying like there is an audience for that, but that audience is probably very small, and the vast majority of the audience, 95% of the people reading those early impressions on Reddit or Kotaku or whatever, are just people who are just like, oh, I heard about this game when I watched the Sony press conference and it seems cool. What's it like? And then they go and read this thing and they get a completely incorrect idea of what it is like or what it is going to be like for them once they obtain it normally through the normal channels. So it serves an audience, but it serves an audience in a very narrow way. And so if your goal is to serve that narrow audience, you need to very clearly contextualize it, which I think John's concern is that the sites that were doing this weren't contextualizing it that way. It was just like, first look, that I think is what's
something that's not going to exist in a couple days. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing is, Hello did say they had a significant patch coming, and I think after those impressions started hitting, they made it much more pronounced. They were like, okay, look, we're going to go through what this patch adds, and that's when those sites that were covering those things were like, oh, it changes everything. Like knowing like the full scope of this patch, I think is when they started to be like, oh wait.
And this is why I mentioned to John in our virtual office that I don't think the issue is binary. It's not good or bad. It's not on or off, right or wrong. Because I think John is right. I think that the primary objective of most of the people writing those impressions was not let's share our experience. It was let's go after the page clicks. And that is an aspect of contemporary games writing, games journalism, whatever you want to call it, that I do disagree with. I don't like writing things just for clicks. I consider that a waste of time, even though I can understand the purpose it serves. But I just don't see things in black or white. I think that it can serve multiple purposes. So even though I agree with John, I think it's like Steve said. There are a number of answers to it.
Yeah, they were the way I view it. They were serving audiences just in a very, very narrow way. So okay, we can be done with the navel gazing. I don't want to turn the entire thing into commentary on journalism because I find that kind of boring.
But that's the whole reason I was here this week.
I'll give you the final word, John, before we move on to our other questions about No Man's Sky. Do you have anything to add to your rant?
No, I mean the only thing that I have to add is basically that I really believe that to serve the reader properly, you have to keep things in context. And I mean, if you want to do this, fine. But I don't think that the way it was handled in this sense. I mean, if you're going to do it, put plaster up front. Okay, Hello Games has said that there's a substantial day one patch coming. If you want to see the game as it is, Here, come on and take a look. But
Yeah, I
this
think
could be totally.
that's sort of the stumbling block here, because like they could present it in context of, hey, there's a patch coming, but by the nature of how they obtained it, where it wasn't something that Hello Games planned on, so Hello Games saw no reason to explain in detail what the patch was going to add until these impressions started coming out. So you could put that disclaimer up front and say like, hey, there's a patch coming, but until Hello Games responded by saying like, here's exactly what's in the patch, they had no context. They couldn't present it in context because they had no idea what the context was.
I will grant that Hello Games could have been a little bit more communicative about what was going on. However, if the game is not out there in the wild, supposedly out there in the wild, they really don't have to explain the patch is changing because nobody will have played it. But then the only reason they did is because all these impressions started coming out. And Sean Murray's sitting over there. Okay, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. Guys, we need to do a blog post. So
it's funny you mention this because I saw like one of the memes I saw going around was kind of this idea that that somehow the journalists were disrespectful for writing about this game, and that like they shouldn't be talking about what's in this patch and that sort of thing. But I'm like, well, they're not the ones who leaked the game, right? Like that's
I mean that's the other thing. There was also a lot of kind of unfair criticism towards journalists. I saw a what do you call those? The little Facebook thing where it suggests stories.
Mm-hmm.
One of them read like websites break embargo for No Man's Sky, and I'm like, no, they didn't. That's not what an embargo is.
Yeah.
An embargo is when we agree to keep something private until a certain date in exchange for you giving us the game. If we obtain the game some other way,
I agree
we're not under embargo.
Yeah, I agree that the terminology was wrong. Okay, I agree. I understand that a street date was broken, and yes, if a game is out there and it's got a disc and you don't know about an update coming, you don't know that things are going to substantially change, then yeah, I mean, I've actually been part of the fact, before in other jobs that I worked at, where, okay, let's go ahead and start working on the review, and we'll post it when the game comes out. This was obviously before streaming and all that other stuff was big, but the thing is, yes, once a street date is broken, yes, kind of the rules are off. But what I'm hanging my argument on is the fact that Sean Murray had made it very, very clear that a substantial day one patch was coming that will substantially change the experience of what was submitted for distribution.
Yeah, and I think what Brian was saying, and I don't even think this is something you'll disagree with, John. But sorry to speak for you, Brian, but I think what Brian was getting at was like people saying it's disrespectful to the game or whatever, or disrespectful to the developers. It's like, I think you'd agree our responsibility isn't to the game developers. It's to the readers. So we can argue that we let the readers down in various ways. Not we personally, but the industry. The industry may have let readers down, but the like, no, you owe something to the publishers. It's like, no, well, we owe them honesty.
Okay. In that regard, I totally agree. Our duty is to the readership, but I do believe that Hello Games got the short end of the stick through no fault of their own.
Yeah, I think
they kind of got screwed over. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean,
that's the thing.
We say that not knowing how sales are. For all we know, it's doing very well.
I'm sure it's doing quite well. But the thing is that and there goes back to this argument too that any publicity, even bad publicity, is publicity. But the thing is that in the overall scheme of things, I think it was handled incredibly poorly by the sites out there that decided to ignore the fact that the game was going to substantially change at release. And it was self-serving, and I wouldn't go as far as disrespectful, but unconscionable. Yeah.
We didn't get a copy, and I feel like if we had, I would have just told Josh, like, just start working on it and start forming your idea because it's supposed to be really long. But even then, I would have kind of screwed over Josh because when they issued the patch, they said, like, we recommend that if you've already started playing, you start over, because there were choices that they were like, technically your save will still work, but there are choices that you will have missed out on if you are further than blah, 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 So, at any rate...
I got to run this.
Now for reals, we can, let's get that rabble-rouser David out of here. David, real quick, before you go, I know you have a book coming up, and I want to give you a chance to plug it.
Oh, yes. It's called Making Fun Stories of Game Development Volume 1. It collects a bunch of stories and articles that I have serialized or written for various publications over the past few years, including, Brian, the making of Rebel Galaxy. So, yeah, it comes out on September 13th.
Brian's a big fan.
I've only played like 20 minutes of it, but I like it.
Good stuff. You know, a bunch of indie games, AAA games, Donkey Kong Country, FTL, a whole bunch of stuff. So
Cool.
I read your. I was actually waiting for an opportunity to do this, but Craddock, you magnificent bastard! I read your book, and
wait, I love to say this. Which one?
Stay a while and listen. I read that one because I have a very, very big soft spot for Diablo and all things related to it. It was very good. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, stay a while and listen was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So
Thanks.
So
David and I had a very good
David.
working relationship with that.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for having me on. It was a good conversation. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
I
We
wanna be
gazed
David
at some
when I grow
neighbors.
up.
See you, David. So
See you, David.
with that, now that he's gone, let's, I asked a few other questions that we can also address real quick about No Man's Sky. This was another example of publishers kind of cutting out reviews. We saw it earlier this year with Doom, which made us very concerned that it was going to be bad. It turned out very good. And now we have this, which doesn't seem so much them intentionally
Well,
withholding.
the single player of Doom turned out good.
Yes,
the
the single player
was
turned out to be very good. Yeah, the multiplayer seems meh, although I know that some people like it, so I don't know. Anyway, but this seems not so much based on like, oh, they just sat on it because they felt like it. It seems more like they had this patch. We've talked about that a lot. They had this patch coming that they knew significantly changed everything, and it probably had to go through its own development and its own cert process. So that seems to be the explanation here. But do we think that that being part of their calculus of being okay to do that, where they know that no one who wants to buy this game on day one is going to actually see a review? Do you think that this is part of a larger trend of publishers deciding that reviewers just matter less?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was an easy question.
Well, but look at it. Like, if you look at how I think we talked about this on before, but it feels like to me that random influencers. I'm not going to say thinkfluencers because I hate that word, but that's what they're using.
Influencers.
It's a real
Is that
term.
even a word?
Yes, it's a horrible word. It's a horrible word, and I
He
refuse
was
to
hanging
use
out in like Web 2.0 conferences or Web 3.0,
Yeah,
whatever they call it.
it's awful. But they're
Yeah, I
but they're
better
looking
check for
at
that in the AP style book.
they're looking to put games in the hands of people like PewDiePie and that sort of thing, who are going to have a very loyal audience who are watching them, and are also, let's face it, going to be less likely to be critical or less hamstrung by journalistic practices. So it's like, okay, we can get a game out there and have a sort of assumption that the person who's playing it is going to be a little bit more in line with the kind of coverage we want for the game, right? Or less cynically, we can make sure the people who we want to actually see this game will watch it or will see it because they're already following this person, right?
And
so,
I think that
Oh, and while we're at it, we'll slip them a few bucks to say a few nice things about
what
it.
you're bringing up is
right.
bringing up this whole messy thing that we've been talking about so much
Uh-huh.
recently. Mobab brought this up sort of in a roundabout way. He said they're increasingly cutting out reviews because reviews are a less reliable way to convince people to buy their game than using other media outlets like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or page Twitch streamers, for example. And yeah, reviewers are less reliable because if the game is bad, it's our job to say that it's bad. And they have tighter control over other channels. But you brought up Twitch streamers, and there was a recent controversy over was it Ubisoft? It was somebody paying Twitch streamers, like giving paid endorsements for Shadow of Mordor, I think. When it wasn't,
I don't
or
think
maybe
it was
THQ.
just Twitch. I think it was YouTube and kind of across the board. But there was definitely.
Yeah.
I
But
think
it was
the
like-
Shadow of Mordor thing was actually investigated by the FTC.
The endorsements were not like clearly marked as endorsements, and obviously there are new rules now, so that's supposed to be taken care of. But the remark that I made on Twitter, my sort of snarky but serious comment was like, guys, do not be surprised when this sort of thing happens because PR's whole job
Mhm.
is to find the best way to do this. Like, that's why they exist, is to find the best.
No, we teach
disseminate their
PR.
message.
We
Yeah.
teach PR. I teach PR, And your job is to, you behave ethically, you behave in a way that's responsible to the public's, but your job is to put the best possible light on the thing you are representing. Now, it's not saying you're lying. It's not saying.
And they went to Twitch and YouTube streamers because that was the new frontier of hey, these people are young and hungry and want to get into the industry, and if we pay them some money and give them some free games, they'll be like, hey, cool, I'm in the industry, I get some free games, and like they're more likely to be excited than the old cynical journalists who were starting to, at this point in time, who were starting to like adopt actual journalistic practices from I mean, there's been some bleed over from like actual journalists coming into the games industry sphere and bringing some of that experience and journalistic practices with them. So,
well, the thing is, like when we talk, like I said, when we teach PR, it is usually lumped under the umbrella of strategic communication, and that's what it is. It is strategy. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, not necessarily always, but in the video game industry, yes, a lot of the time it is. But yeah, it is. You are trying to specifically figure out how to allocate your resources, which is access to the game, in the areas that are going to make the most good and have the best impact for the brand you represent. And increasingly, that is not going to be with critics. And now some people are going to take this completely in the opposite direction and say, well, that's because critics are inherently, they're motivated by social reasons or they're inherently untrustworthy or whatever, which is not at all true. But there is definitely if I'm if I'm running a PR for a game, right? I'm not going to try to reach out to you, Steve Watts, or to you, John Kiefer. You're good. I have nothing against you. And I'm glad that you came to our event and covered it. But the people that I want to see the game are the guy who's got 30,000 YouTube subscribers, right?
Yeah.
Not because
and the guy who isn't even necessarily
you have a bigger audience.
Reach out to you don't even reach out necessarily to people who are known for games like PewDiePie. You reach out to a rapper who also likes games.
I would go to
exactly.
I'm trying to remember who was the rapper that had access to Battlefield.
And that's not even to say just to give this sort of disclaimer.
Well, there's a video that was released where Terry Crews was playing.
He was. There's a rapper, but yeah, Terry Crews too. Was he made this big thing about
wasn't it Snoop
after Battlefield?
Wiz Khalifa
wasn't it
played
Snoop?
a lot of games, so maybe it was someone younger. I don't know. Maybe it's Khalifa.
Point
I'm not
is,
sure.
To take this a little sidebar here very quickly. That's not to say, and we have to actually wrap this up fairly quickly. But that's not to say that traditional journalists or whatever you want to call people like me don't also have a close relationship.
I got names for you, but I can't say them on here.
Yeah. I know you do. It's not to say that people like me don't also have a close relationship with PR that's mutually beneficial. Mm-hmm. So for a real world example, one of my favorite things that I've written lately about Hearthstone was the making of a card about Yogg-Saron when the Old Gods launched. And that took a lot of cooperation from Blizzard. That's not something that wasn't me sneaking into their offices and flipping through the files. That was me reaching out to a PR person being like, hey, I have this cool idea for a feature. It would take some cooperation from you guys. Can we do this? And then she got back to me and we did. So I love being able to do that sort of thing, and that's something that absolutely requires their involvement. But it's not like we're on this mountaintop where it's no, we are completely separate from PR and we do not, we do not
I totally
fraternize with them or anything.
I just got confirmation from Bethesda that they're going to give me some access to do a big interview / feature on Dishonored 2. So it definitely has its place, but the thing is that I've always been of the opinion that if they're going to play games literally with how you get your review copy, I'm not adverse to going out and buying the damn thing day one if I have to. Again, it removes a level of appearance of impropriety because you're getting a freebie. And it basically just shows that, hey, we're going to do our job whether they cooperate with us or not.
Yep.
And the thing is that, unfortunately, the immediacy of the internet, you lose the initial, hey, we had, 3 extra days to play this before the thing hits release, but at least you still, God knows the way things are these days. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. So, good journalistic practices are, out the window most of the time anyway. I'm a dinosaur. But for the most part, I mean, I'm not adverse to doing it the right way, and if that means buying a copy, that means buying a copy.
And I think that's a good. I mean, I really like that attitude, though. Like, I'm glad that there are people out there willing to do that. So, like, you call yourself a dinosaur, but I say dinosaurs are pretty cool. So,
but robots are cooler. Anyway,
a robot dinosaur now. That's there's a killing machine.
I'm gonna barrel towards the wrap up because one, I don't have a game today. I'm sorry. It's been like I said, it's been a strange week, but also because I actually have more home worker people coming here in just a few minutes, so I actually have to sign off. But before we do all of that, we will give everybody a chance to plug their work. So, John, do you have any work, any writings you're particularly proud of that you'd like to give a shout out to?
No, aside from the news that I've been building out, the South Park.
Our senior news guy, I guess that's not his title anymore. He's just called senior editor now. But Daniel Perez was out for like 2 days, and Kiefer has been running himself ragged with news. So if you look at the news,
well, the South Park thing we did this morning. The South Park thing we did this morning was actually a lot of fun with the new the Ubisoft's ripoff of the Oculus Rift. That was a fun story to do.
Kiefer enjoys any opportunity to make terrible puns in his stories, which
Guilty.
I would take credit for, but I think it's probably more that you rubbed off on me than I rubbed off on you. So, so yeah, read about South Park and just read all of the news that John's been writing this week because it's
right. And like I said, as far as features, I haven't done a lot of features lately, but I'm having fun doing the news. So
yeah. So
I've enjoyed your work. I've been following. It's good. So, but
you do good work.
So, yeah.
So Brian, what are you up to?
Nothing big to plug. I mean, always like we did a video on Pokemon Go for the university. That's on my Twitter page. It's at Learnonaut, LearNonaut, like an astronaut, but for learning. And so that's like kind of the biggest thing. Like I said, a lot of the stuff. It's the thing about academia is you literally do not have. You have such a huge gap between you write it when you publish it. So there's Pokemon Go right there.
I can stop asking you.
No, you could, but I like to use like other things. I'll promote other people's work. So I like comics, and the all different Avengers Annual #1 came out this week, and it's a really kind of funny riff on fan fiction and fan culture. It's like basically a bunch of stories that are centered around the idea that Miss Marvel has had fan fiction written about her that she wants taken off the internet, and then while she's waiting for the administrator to get back to her about that, she reads some of the other fan fiction written about her fellow superheroes, and it's super cute and funny, and there's some really high quality kind of work being done in it, and then the ending is really funny. So if you like comics, you like superheroes, and you just like something kind of silly and cute, that's a good thing to go. So check that out.
Cool. Yeah.
Like I said, if I can't promote anything, I'll just promote something else I think is neat. So
there you go. So a new Hearthstone adventure launched. I didn't mention that in the "What Have You Been Playing" segment, but the prologue is pretty cool. I'll just plug the prologue real quick and say play the prologue at the very least because I thought that was one of the cooler like story segments they've done in Hearthstone. But because there's a new adventure, I am working on my my weekly heroic guides. This is sort of a tradition going back a few expansions. Where I just write about how to beat the bosses to get the awesome card back that you can only get by beating all the bosses on Heroic.
Thank you for your sacrifice in writing about Hearthstone.
I know. It's tough. It's so tough. But the first one of those is up now. Covers the Parlor. There's 3 more wings after this one. So if you are struggling with any of the bosses, go check that out, and hopefully I give you some tips that help out. So. That is the show.
One thing that I forgot to mention. And one thing I forgot to mention in what you're playing is I have been playing a lot of Pokemon Go, and I've been focusing a lot on news coming out of Niantic, which means there actually is news finally coming out of Niantic on what their plans are. And, their communication skills are slowly evolving.
Our Pokemon, what? It's evolving.
So, yes, exactly.
Niantic wants to learn patch
See what I did there?
We're good at moving.
Good. That's good. I like it.
All right. That's. Yeah, Kiefer is sort of our resident Pokemon Go expert. I think you're keeping up with it more than any of us. How dare someone call you a dinosaur? Anyway.
You're hip.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the show.
I'm a fossil and a dinosaur. There we go.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Review us on iTunes. Helps other people find the show. We will be hopefully back with a normally timed show next week. So thank you, everybody. And until then, for John Kiefer
Bye, guys.
and in absentia David Craddock, I'm Steve Watts.
I'm Brian Carr.
And we'll see you on
John
Chatty.
Kiefer.